This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers podcast.
With Tony Brueski.
Bryan Kohberger is the subject of this segment. Jennifer Coffindaffer, Hidden Killers contributor and former FBI special agent, is joining us to discuss a lot of objections raised about demolishing the house where the students were living and murdered on King Road. Members of the families, three of them, signaling that they want it preserved for the trial. They may need it for the trial. What's your thoughts on that? On the school wanting to get that thing down? I know the argument is it's a trauma. It is a triggering thing to see that on the campus every single day. That's understandable, but at the same point, it's still a crime scene that the case hasn't been resolved yet.
Well, both sides, shockingly, neither side seems to be motioning to keep that house up. We know that they are going to have state-of-the-art video. Mm-hmm. And, certainly these days, it's almost like you're in the house in these video translations of the home. But I would just argue it is important for both sides. No matter whether I was a defense attorney or the prosecution side of the house, I would want this preserved. There is no substitute for being able to walk those stairs to hear the creaks, to being able to see from the vantage point of Dylan Mortensen what she could have possibly seen, to see exactly how close that footprint was as Dylan Mortensen, shut the door. We know that footprint was close to her door. To be in that house and to have them maybe play or have people inside and outside the house and see what could be heard. Because remember, the Ring camera supposedly picked up a lot of, picked up a thud, picked up noises. All that's going to be important. And when a jury can feel that and see that, the proximity of everything, I just don't think any video is going to take the place of the house. I'm shocked neither side is fighting to keep it up.
It's interesting because in a situation like that, something being on the location of where the crime took place, it could really work in either way for the defense or for the prosecution. Obviously, we saw it recently in the Murdaugh case where they visited the shed and shortly thereafter, a verdict was reached of guilty. But that's not always the case when the jury goes and visits a location. Do you think that maybe the prosecution and the defense in this case really don't know how that would play either way, and that's why neither are raising their hand to say, let's keep this up?
Well, I think the defense doesn't want it up and doesn't want jurors in there because they're going to see a bloodbath. Okay. They're going to see blood stains and it's going to look horrible, like a war zone in the proximity of where those kids were murdered. Mm-hmm. So I see the defense's side. I think they think that will outweigh the pluses of the acoustics and, other things that could possibly work in their favor. I think the prosecution, while they would want the jury to see that side of it, I think they're concerned about, just as I said, the acoustics. Why didn't people hear anybody on the stairs? Why was Dylan able to hear things, but Bethany wasn't? But if they go in that house and walk, maybe on the first floor, you can easily hear. I've seen testimony. I shouldn't say testimony. I've seen accounts from different individuals who lived at 1122 King give completely different reporting. In other words, prior students that lived there, some said, you could hear a pin drop from one floor to the other. It was so noisy. Yes. And others said, oh, you couldn't hear a thing. Mm-hmm. So I think a juror would want to know that. And maybe the defense or prosecution is worried about how that will play out.
Mm-hmm. It could be a little of a hiccup for either in some way, shape, or form. Kohberger had that 2014 arrest that we've learned about, stealing from his own sister her cell phone. His father actually turning him in. This is, of course, at the time he was in the throes of struggling with drug addiction. What do you think this tells us about him, his personality, his way of thinking, his way of being able to do things? when we look back at this and stealing from a member of his own family?
Well, the big key there is, what was that phone used for? He was in and out of addiction, we know from reporting. Did he take it and sell it?
Mm-hmm.
Did he take it and use it for another purpose? Did he take it just out of anger and
Mm-hmm.
crush the thing? I mean, we really don't know exactly the purpose that phone was used for,
Mm-hmm.
other than he stole it, because we can't see that expunged report. Law enforcement can, though. I think for me, it definitely spoke of this family dynamic. It just seemed to speak of a family that was really torn and divided. It takes a lot, I think, for a parent to turn a child in.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like, this father had it and had chosen to back his daughter,
Mm-hmm.
who, of course, was in the right. The daughter had done nothing wrong that we know about. And it just, to me, shed a light more on the dynamic. And if he wasn't in the throes of heroin, in other words, if he didn't try to sell a cell phone for money, if it was for some other purpose, I just think to me, I can't imagine, and most people don't want to hurt those they love.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most people in healthy relationships that love their family members, that's the last person they want to victimize.
Yeah.
So, I wish we knew more details around it. It could be more interesting than we think. But no matter what, law enforcement needed to look at that to make sure there wasn't anything hiding behind that expunged record that could be purposeful for their case.
We haven't heard much at all from the parents, other than information when they went to that grand jury, the investigative grand jury, a bit more than a month ago. We heard some unconfirmed reports of how Thanksgiving went at the family, with one of his sisters allegedly pointing out, "Hey, you drive the white Elantra. You're coming from that area. How do we know it's not you?" Today, as Kohberger sits in his cell and we await a trial, where do you think the family is at today in terms of their view of their son, their brother? It's just pure conjecture and opinion, but where do you think they're standing at this point?
Well, what I look at is action, right? Action speaks louder than words.
Mm-hmm.
If this were my son, I would be in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
I would be visiting. I would probably sell my home and buy a home or an apartment near in Idaho,
Mm-hmm.
to be there and supportive for my son if I thought he were not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
If I thought he was guilty or could possibly have done this crime, I would probably still be there in support, probably trying to talk him into pleading guilty
Mm-hmm.
and doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But I find the whole situation with them seemingly offering absolutely no support. I feel terrible for this family, to be honest with you, Tony.
Sure.
I really don't think that they knew. I don't think they were complicit. I don't think the fact he drove back with his son, I think that was prearranged.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that. My children are in college. This is very normal behavior, I believe, to make a cross-country trip, want to spend some time with your son. So I don't think there was anything nefarious about it. And I feel terrible for this family.
Yeah, I mean, it does show that prior to knowledge of these accusations, they were very much about helping their kids. The fact that he went over there and did that drive, and we've heard reports that it's not the first time that that's been done. They were active with them. So for them not to be showing up and not really doing anything and not saying anything, I think that does speak volumes.
And I think the other thing, Tony, that's a big red flag to me was the Smithers grand jury.
Mm-hmm.
They get called into that grand jury. Why did they hire counsel to try to quash the subpoena? It didn't work. They had to testify.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think we've talked about this, Tony, but if I'm being called into a grand jury to provide an alibi, and I have an alibi for my son, why wouldn't I be banging at the door? Why wouldn't I be calling the prosecutor?
Yep.
So I found that extremely interesting too. They seem to just be so distancing themselves and maybe questioning and believing that their son could be culpable for this crime.
You're locked into the Hidden Killers podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.